We'll start first with we're talking about the article from The Athletic today, talking about basically what happened between Spurs, Antonio Conte and the players, and why we're in the situation that we are in. And the main, one of the first points I want to talk about is the players, because one of the interesting things that was pointed out in the article was when Conte first came in, the Spurs players were so desperate for a kind of structure to play in and a kind of way moving forward. And under Nuno, they didn't feel like they had that. They didn't feel like they're going in a direction. And then Conte comes in, and he had like great training methods, and they really bought into the structure he was giving to them and building. And then it says in the article, but the Spurs players felt like they could only play that for so long. They couldn't play that kind of way forever. And then the following season, they felt like they wanted to play more freedom. Then they felt like the structure all of a sudden became rigid, and they got bored of the training sessions. But the thing is, they said these things under Pochettino and under Mourinho. Well, I guess you can say it's different players, but a lot of the same things were said.
Don't run over that fact, though. That is a key fact.
Which fact? Players. There is different players. I want to play a audio clip from the Athletic podcast as a reference point that we can discuss before we get into it. But I want to know if you can hear this. One sec. Let me know if you can hear this.
I just find the whole this idea that Conte was pushing forward, and many agreed with, and fair play, that the players are to blame. I accept that they should take a portion of the blame, but I also find the idea that there's some sort of fundamental flaw that all Tottenham players have that makes them unmanageable. I just find that really far-fetched. Like most players of that level, you have to be extraordinarily talented and motivated and determined to make it. So this idea that there isn't a manager out there who can get a tune out of them, I just find ridiculous. And also, they've had three managers since Pochettino. Bear in mind, Pochettino, they did perform incredibly well, and they actually punched massively above their weight for about 5 years. The idea that, we've had Mourinho, Nuno, and Conte, what else can we do? If they don't perform under those managers, there's no manager out there, as if those three cover like the whole spectrum of football management.
Right. So I guess the question is, those are all fair points, but as well, there does seem to be a culture around Tottenham over the past few years of players kind of originally buying into something and then all of a sudden feeling like they're tired of these tactics, and it's happened a few times. Like, why did they tire quicker than maybe like the Chelsea players or the Inter Milan players or Juventus players? Why did that happen? So I guess the question is, how responsible are the players for the current situation that we're in? I guess we'll start with you, Brains. How much responsibility do you put on the players for how things have turned out and why they've maybe they haven't had that motivation, or does Conte take the majority of the blame for you?
Yeah, I don't put it like. Here's the thing: as a player, like I don't put the blame on the players, and I think trying to put blame on players is such a weak argument. If you're saying like that whole thing of like, oh, they threw this manager on the bus, they threw that man. It's like, who? It's different players. Are we saying Dyer and Davies? Dyer loves Conte. Davies has had a great time under Conte. Like, who is it then? Is it Tanganga and Sanchez? Like, well, they're French players. They don't really matter. So then really you're talking about Son, Kane, Hobby, Bentancur, Kulu. Now, if he can't win over world-class players, then he's a bad manager. Those players have played under great managers. The thing with like not evolving your training, think about footballers. Think about this. It's their job. They go there every day, like the same as we all do jobs. That is their day job. You can't expect them to play rigid drills for like forever. Players want to evolve. Every single player, it's their job, not just for their club, but for them to want to get better. Their job is to evolve. They need the coaching to get better and step up. They need to see things happening. They need to see it happen in a game. If a strategy in training is easy to assassinate in training, but it's impossible in a game, it breaks down in a player's mind, so they will not believe in it. And if it happens over and over and over, it will start to... Teams, if you think about a team, there will be different fragments, but it's like once an idea doesn't work, it becomes a poison that goes through all the different players and they will stop playing that system. It's not that they're downing tools. It's not that they're being... Some part of it will be subconscious. They will just go, this doesn't work. Why are we doing this? And so that's the problem with Conte. He will go, I'm Conte motherfucker. You know, it's like that doesn't matter to players.
There goes the demonetization within the first 6 minutes of the video.
Don't worry, because thanks to the lag, Sean, this stream has been going for 45 minutes, so don't you worry about that. Don't you worry about that.
So I don't really believe that. I think it's a team has to be together with manager and with coach. Like, I don't believe that you can say that, like, a manager has to come in and he has to inspire the dressing room. He has to win over each individual player. We have, and at Spurs, this whole thing that they're kind of insinuating through that, what we were just talking about there, is that Spurs, there's no care for player welfare, like mental welfare. So, like, if you look at the Amazon All or Nothing that Spurs did, and then you look at the one that Arsenal did, there's that guy in the Arsenal club who pulls people aside and he's like, how's it going? How are you doing? Like, they sit down, they watch some footage, they go, what do you think you could have done better there? And he's like a lovely brother guy, because Arteta's not that guy, right? Arteta will put his arm around you, but he has people to facilitate the side of his personality he doesn't have. Conte doesn't have anyone that's going to go, you know, he's like, Ryan, go down and fucking toss him off for a sec. Like, he doesn't have that, right? So you need
In fairness, in the article, it does say that Gianni Ventroni was one of the people who used to do that.
He's on.
Obviously,
yeah. We got to get someone else in there mad quick. Can you imagine? But even that, can you imagine someone sitting down with Eric Dyer, you know, and like Eric, look at this header. See how you've headed the ball straight into the path of Mo. Can you see how they see these mistakes you're making? What could you do better, Eric? Can you see it? Can you see it? Look at the screen, Eric. What could you do better, Eric? Sometimes we have to admit that, sometimes we just have players who are not good enough. And so it's a multitude of things. You have players who are best friends with other players. I guarantee you, Harry Kane does not want Eric Dyer to go. He's one of his best friends. But Harry Kane knows he is not a good enough defender to be on the field with me. So then you have these weird situations where players want players to stay, but they know their team isn't good enough. So you see how it's like all so messed up. You have to change it all. You have to have a manager who's willing to change everything from the bottom up.
Let's bring Ash Matic in here. Ash, obviously Brains does have some good points when it comes to if the players aren't kind of motivated to play for you. That's obviously ultimately the manager's responsibility. But how do you square when the squad that we have who haven't won anything are basically have the opinion of a multi-title winning manager that his training methods are too rigid or there's a problem with them when the players are the ones who haven't won anything?
I think it's a mixture of both. I don't think it's one answer fits all. Me personally, I think the first time they came in, they were craving for structure because they didn't have a leadership in Nuno, which they respected and they thought or believed that they can get to the next level. After playing after Jose Mourinho, Nuno was obviously a student of Mourinho. So basically, you're getting a downgrade. And I felt that's why you had players like Kane pushing for a massive move to Man City. We fast forward now into Conte, and now you've got someone who's more of a disciplinarian, and now it's more like a taskmaster you've got at the ground. And sometimes, as a player, you just kind of need that freedom, especially attacking players like your Sons, your Kulus. You sometimes need that kind of freedom to express yourself. And when you're not happy as well, you sometimes don't play with that freedom on the pitch. You can't express yourself in the same way. So, but at the same time, with Conte, I feel like the reason why the top managers are top and they are elite is because they've proven their work and their method and their mettle in their approach and their ways into the game. So his blueprint, he's taken that over to Juventus. He did well. He went over to Inter Milan. It worked. It went well. He went to Chelsea. It worked. It went well. And the only reason why it didn't work at some of these clubs was because of external factors, i.e. or e.g. your board members getting involved, wanting to sell off the best players, etc., etc. With Tottenham, he got top 4. Ultimately, it was working. So when you look at that sense, you're saying, well, we've got an elite manager, the players are craving structure, and now they've got it. It's like, who's right, who's wrong? The way I see it, for me, a weakness of Conte was maybe profiling players, because some players, he wants big players, he wants tall players, he wants physical players, fast players, and he wants that all across the pitch. But when you profile a player, some players are better at dribbling and are naturally suited to that game. Some players are better on possession and they're more suited to that game. Some players love defending. Some players are more aggressive. So sometimes when you look at someone like Erik ten Hag, he's got Sancho. Now, Sancho was a winger. He's looked at Sancho and he said, you know what, I'm going to play you in the middle of the park. I'm going to play you as a 10. And I'm going to mix your game up because I know you like dribbling. I'm going to make you carry the ball and I'm going to make you switch with Bruno. So Bruno will sometimes be the 10 and then sometimes Sancho will be the 10. And they will swap on the right-hand side and will confuse teams. But where Conte tactically, and you've seen it, Sim, me and you've watched games together, and he hasn't changed things when things need to be changed. He's too rigid where you've got the two workhorses in the middle, the two workhorses and the two DM, I call them defensive midfielders. I don't call them double pivots because they don't push high up enough when we have the ball to create overloads like you see like Arsenal where you've got Martin Odegaard and Xhaka. They often swap over and sometimes it's like a 2-3-5 with Arsenal or Man City. They attack with a 5 and they switch things up. I know I'm not saying Spurs should do that. I'm just saying when it comes to tactical flexibility and players having certain roles, or you're saying, you know what, Emerson, I don't think you're a wing back. I think I'm going to change your position slightly. And I think maybe I'm going to bring another player in that position and I'm going to move and I'm going to develop Emerson in a different way. I although we have seen Emerson played in the inverted fullback or wing back position, I just feel like sometimes he has a plan, he sticks with it, and he goes with that plan throughout the entire 90 minutes, where there's times to kind of switch it depending on your opponent, and depending on who you're playing and who you're facing. So the point I'm trying to make is, I think with Conte, because he hasn't been able to, he's been a little bit rigid, he's kind of lost some of the younger players, because when you're young, you're like a sponge. You're constantly picking up new things. You want to learn new things. You want to try new tactics, new formations, especially when things aren't going your way. Especially in-game matches and scenarios when, you know, Southampton have pushed all their players on top, and you haven't got a player that's risk-averse in the Højbjerg, and he's not wanting to do that difficult pass to kind of get us out of that difficult position. He ends up passing it, and it comes back over onto us, and we haven't got players that have enough energy to kind of help that back four, back five out, because sometimes the back five needs to be protected and the front four aren't doing enough. They're too close, because when we were playing Southampton, there was 7 players in the box. Why? They're meant to have their shape. We're losing our shape. Who's the player on the pitch that needs to be able to sort that out? And is that being addressed during the week, during training sessions by Conte? So it's these small man-to-man things, it's these tactical things as well that I'm looking at Conte and thinking you're meant to be developing them, not just tactically, but man-to-man, putting an arm around the shoulder. Mm-hmm. And I was surprised to hear that, because I didn't mind him calling the players out, but I thought he called the players out inside the dressing room. So I thought he went to just had a word with them and then came out and said his piece. But he didn't. And that, for me, that was like, borderline, where does the level of professionalism come into it? Because I'm trying to back you, Conte.
Tactical manipulation, mate, to get himself a contract contract payout.
Yeah, it's probably it's looking more likely, considering especially that the fact that there's a dispute right now. There seems to be a dispute about him being sacked or him resigning, all that kind of stuff.
Has he turned up today? Has he turned up yesterday?
No. Apparently he's not coming back. Apparently he's not going to come back. I want to bring in Sean, though, on this topic. Sean, I want to ask you about that. In the article, it details how a lot of the players felt like the training was so always the same. There wasn't many changes, and and they were getting kind of tired and bored of it. And even some of the players you would say that they were looking forward to international duty just so they can try something different. But if the players feel that way, at what point is it on their part unprofessional to kind of not be motivated by the tactics of a multi-title winning manager? Or is it on the manager to kind of mix it up in training and make sure he's keeping the players motivated on the tactics part? Where do you stand on that? Because it's so, like, is it not unprofessional? Does it not also go to a poor mentality from the players if they're unhappy with his training methods?
Yeah, 100%, Sim. I think in anything in life, it's never one nor the other. Anyone that comes with a binary approach to an opinion is probably like coming with a confirmation bias. It's always a subtle shade of grey. For me, there's two different sides to the conversation, right? One is, are the players good enough on the pitch to be able to implement the tactics and execute them effectively? And you could make the argument that half of the team probably aren't, right, to be able to go on and achieve things that can satiate the players and the manager and the fans, where maybe you'll tolerate boredom for success. But the part where he's really coming at it from, and this is the part where, like, to your question specifically, do the players have the professionalism to tolerate the boredom in the training, to stay focused on the pitch, to have that winning mentality? It's the psychological aspect of the game. I was reading up on Julian Nagelsmann earlier and last night, and he made a quote, right, that a while back, I think when he was at Hoffenheim or when he was at Leipzig, and he said, for me as a manager, I'm 70% tactics, 30% psychology. And he went on into like the realms, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase it. He basically said, I have very nuanced and unique relationships with every single player that I manage, because every single person is individual. Some people prefer the stick, some people prefer the carrot, and there's always a combo of both that's necessary. And outsourcing that stuff to psychologists kind of dilutes your ability to really have a relationship with the player. And so one of the things that he takes very seriously is trying to establish the way to impact the psychology of an individual. And when you're playing in a football team, you're not just trying to, it's not like a golfer who has a psychologist, because it's just down to him. It's just down to how he impacts every strike of the ball and focuses. But when you've got a football team, you've got 11 players on the pitch, you've got 8 or whatever it is on the bench, and you've got 5 or 6 that aren't even included, and they all have to integrate and interact all day long, every day. And like Brains was saying, the influence of one little niggle, one person that's popular in the dressing room that's unhappy with his treatment, all that kind of thing can infect the overall satisfaction, the overall drive, and the willingness to play and perform for a manager. So it's a very difficult bunch of plates that are constantly being spun, and the manager needs to take a charge of that. And when it comes to Conte, I don't think any of us are really too clued up. First of all, I think I said it last time I was on your show, Sim. As content creators, as much as we all might have opinions, none of us, as far as I'm aware, are doctors or psychologists or psychiatrists that can understand the intricacies of how people's brains work. Neither are the people that, Conte. He might be a brilliant tactician, a brilliant, football guy, but is he a brilliant guy who understands the minds of individuals? Maybe, maybe not. One thing we can look at is Emerson Royale came out with a statement in the last week saying, but his opinion's his opinion, but for what it's worth, none of us had very cozy relationships with Conte. And again, I'm paraphrasing, but he said it was not a very close relationship. It was kind of standoffish. There wasn't too many interactions. And so that to me is an issue. If you're getting paid a lot of money, like Conte is, to do a job, and all you're really ever doing is delivering the same tactics, obviously, like you said to the point in the article, if the training is very repetitive, because he doesn't want to pivot from a 3-4-3 to a back four, a 4-2-3-1, if there's no natural desire to practice different situations, different solutions for different situations, and you're repeating the same old thing over and over again, the players will get bored. And keeping players mentally occupied, mentally inspired, is definitely going to be part of the job. And then on the pitch, if you're doing exactly the same thing, if you don't have any tactical fluency or dynamism, if you're thinking that the same square peg should be suitable for every hole, regardless of the shape, whether it's circle or triangle or whatever else, then again, I think you're going to have problems keeping the players motivated, unless you have a specific set of players that naturally have their own strength of willpower, strength of mind, and Tottenham clearly don't have that. So in summary, whose fault is it for the players to be to not be playing for him, or to have, not suggesting down tools? I think it would be easier for Conte to play with a bunch of with players that are first and foremost just technically better, and therefore the fact that you're getting 3 points every game or most of the time, that in itself is some sort of motivation to keep going. But when things go rough and you're not getting the results, you're not getting the juice from the squeeze, then you probably need a manager who has a better skill set than Conte has to be able to continue to find ways to motivate the players when times are not going so strong. And I don't think Conte has that much experience working with teams that are not as good as the team, not good enough to always be near the top of the table. And I think with Tottenham, it's his toughest task because we are nowhere near good enough to win the league, and I think his deficiencies as a manager is clear when it comes to the motivational and the psychological side of the game.
Yeah, just picking up on that point, it's like, see if you run a big company, and you have your office where all your kind of like your office workers work in. If you look at like just like an accountancy firm, a local accountancy firm, like, they're just like people just working away, and our call centers, boring office jobs, like boring call center jobs. Like they always have to get new. You always have to hire. So you're spending fees on agencies to get people to come in and work for your crappy company because the people who run those crappy companies don't care about their employees. So there's a constant turnover of new employee, and none of the employees care about the job. It's like sit here, read a script, sell insurance. That's a dreadful life. Who wants that job? Nobody wants that job. That job doesn't even have to get done anymore. Go and look how Google treat their employees. Like, other than the over-the-score woke stuff, and they fire people left, right, and center for saying anything. But like, as in, you walk in, it's light colors.
Yeah,
there's games to play. You don't have to have a set work time. You can go in, you can sit, you can do your work anywhere. You can go to a cafe and work. It's like they treat people. They understand that your employee has to be treated a certain way. Now think about footballers. Not only do they have to get their bodies in extremely good shape to play like high pressure football with 60,000 people watching them, we can't even begin to perceive the pressure that is on these humans. And we think, but they get paid 50 million. That's even worse. That's even more pressure for them. Someone like Richarlison, this is why the initial thing I didn't want Richarlison to come in, because I know he's a young guy. He's a Brazilian. He's very fiery. He's full of blood and guts. And you want someone like that. You want to take him in. You want to be like, you're my guy. You are my guy. You will play every week. If you play well, you will play every week. You need, and so as soon as he doesn't get that treatment, and he's getting paid 50 million, so his brain goes, I'm starting for Brazil. I'm getting paid 50 million. His head is going like, I am the god, and then yet he's got Conte going, fuck out of here. Like, get out of here. You won't do this for me in training. You won't do that. You can see that will break his soul. And that's what happened.
But from a fan perspective, when you see Antonio Conte goes into the job at Juventus and Chelsea and Inter Milan, and all the players in those squads are very receptive to his ideas, and a lot of the time they're fully on board, their players, with what he's trying to do, and by and large, the Inter Milan players absolutely loved Conte, and they wanted him to stay after his 2 years. Chelsea obviously won the league. Juventus, he won multiple titles. Even Italy, he was well fond of, and they were very receptive to his ideas. Then you hear at Tottenham that our players all of a sudden are not as receptive to the ideas that Conte has and his repetitiveness in training. How do us fans square that with the portioning who's to blame as to why this relationship hasn't worked out? Is it just because his ideas are outdated? Is it because the players, our players, have a specific mentality issue? It's just very frustrating as a Tottenham fan when we've brought in a manager who's won lots of trophies and his ideas and training methods are very highly thought of when he goes to other clubs. Yet when he comes here, our players these are boring. We don't want to play these tactics. It's like, well, who are you to say that?
But Sam, can you imagine being him? Just imagine you're Conte and you're winning, right? And you go into Inter Milan, you got Barella, and that fits what you love because you love a regista, right? You love a player who's going to carry the ball.
By the way, Inter Milan hadn't won a league title for 19 years when he went there. He won their first title in a long time.
But they were always they always had a squad that was competitive with the very top teams in Italy.
and they were building up.
Potentially, but they dropped. Yeah, they had dropped. I mean, maybe not when Conte went there, but there were a few years they had dropped into mid-table, and there were definitely a few. They were in Europa League for many years.
But Sam, it's just about what that team might have needed. They might have needed a pragmatist to come in, pull things together, and use the. When I look at that Inter Milan squad, I see Conte played to the strengths of that squad for what they need, for what they had and what they needed. He goes to another, like Chelsea as well. A great squad of players, a really great squad, really good talent all the way through that team. Comes to Spurs, and now he's got all that. Like, winning is sometimes is baggage, because your brain goes, that shit works for me. So if someone's not going to do that stuff, then they're losers. They're scum. They're not going to do. So I can see his brain going like, no, you're going to do my stuff. And rather than coming into Spurs, not understanding the weight that is on every single player who pulls on a Spurs shirt, knowing that 60,000 people every single week are expecting some magic thing where it's
also,
all just going to get better.
Gavin, the accusation that was always thrown at Conte from some elements, right, was that he came in and wanted everybody, from Daniel Levy, Paratici, to the 25 members of the squad, or the 15 players that have come, 12 players that have come in and gone out, whatever, since then. Everyone has to adapt to his winning methodology, right, which is fine, right? But there's no one way to win. And if you are that good, then part of what makes up, I believe, at least in my opinion, the title of being elite is that you have a plan B, or you have an element of adaptability. And if I think it would have been far easier, if he is that good, it would have been far easier for him to adapt to make the best of the squad, rather than asking 25 individuals to adapt all of their games to pivot to his system, because there'll be 3 or 4 players that go, okay, I'm capable, I'm competent, I can adapt, I can pivot. But there'll be 5 or 6 that just aren't competent enough. And unless you have a whole team singing from the same hymn sheet, then you're never going to be able to make that step. So really, like, the path of least resistance for Tottenham to have got the best out of Conte was for Conte to adapt.
But isn't it frustrating when Conte first comes in? Obviously, for 6 months we played really well. If we'd kept up like these kind of standards when he first came in for this year, we could have been much higher up the table. So, but if I'm a fan, right, and if I'm hearing from like this article, look, the players really bought into it this season and they tried their best, but you know what, it just wasn't working, even though they gave it their all. But I can almost accept a lot more responsibility for Conte. But if I'm hearing from these players, they didn't like the training methods, they found it boring, found it repetitive, I'm like, that even makes me more frustrated in a way with the players, in a way, because it's like, why couldn't you just held up those standards you held last season? Why all of a sudden you starting to lose that motivation? Why? Surely you have that professionalism on you.
Sim, the first thing you said is the same as the second thing you said. Like Conte, like a coach and a coaching staff, you have to engage players to make them better. Conte comes in, like, it's not going that great for a while, but they find a way to make the squad. And I've definitely felt that they found a way to make the best parts of the squad work. And we scored goals and we did well. We got to the end of that season. But did any of us think if this can't just continue like this? Something's got to improve. We've got to bring players in, got to get the bad defenders out. Yeah. And then obviously you can't just your job as a manager just isn't like, oh yeah, bring me in great players and then we're going to keep doing these same training drills every single week. Have you ever played for a football team and you do the same drills every single week? As a football player, you do not want training to be easy. It's never about that. You want training to be hard. You want it to be hard, but you want it to be interesting, new things. What's the coach got? And if it's the same thing every week, well, you know that on Sundays and Saturdays that when we get into this situation, we get battered. Okay, so surely the training is going to be now adapting to what do we do in these situations? And we all can see that when Spurs get into certain situations, they go blank. 3-1 up, see the game out, blank.
Everyone needs to keep you always need to keep things moving. And to your point, Brains, earlier, if you're in a job, it doesn't matter what job you are. If you're the manager, if you are the manager of a team of people that cold call, it's a very boring, repetitive job. But you've got to find ways to make it fun, like play games with the people doing the calls, like have competitions, do little things that keep them occupied. Even my dog Bugsy gets bored when I turn left out of my house, and she knows I'm taking her on the same walk I take her 90% of the time. If I turn right and I go down the other way, she's like, oh, something new's going on. Like there's like, you need to keep creatures.
Your dog has a poor mentality, Sean.
An upgrade.
Blame the manager.
As
Blame the
footballers,
manager.
I'm blaming you, Sean, for that.